The blood on Zelda Norton's lip tasted like copper and defeat, but she kept singing anyway because Marcus would kill her if she stopped mid-song. Watsonville, California, in the summer of 1882, was a place where men asked few questions about a woman who wore long sleeves in August, and Zelda had learned to be grateful for that small mercy even as the heat made the fabric stick to her wounds. The Silver Dollar Saloon was packed tonight, filled with cowboys fresh off the range and miners who had struck it rich in the nearby hills, all of them drinking whiskey and pretending not to notice the tremor in her voice when she hit the high notes. Xavier Kendrick noticed. He sat alone at a corner table, his hat pulled low over his eyes, but Zelda could feel his gaze on her like a physical thing. He had been coming to the saloon every night for the past week, always ordering the same drink, always sitting in the same spot, always watching her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. Most men looked at her with lust or indifference, but this cowboy looked at her like he could see straight through the powder on her cheek that covered the purple fingerprints Marcus had left there this morning. Zelda finished her song to scattered applause and moved through the crowd toward the bar, keeping her movements small and controlled because sudden gestures made her ribs scream. Marcus stood behind the bar, his meaty hands polishing a glass, his eyes following her every step. He owned the silver dollar, and he owned her too, or at least that was what he told her every time his fist connected with her stomach where the bruises would not show. "You were flat on that last chorus," Marcus said, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "We will talk about it later." The promise in those words made Zelda's hands shake as she reached for the water glass he set in front of her. Later meant after closing, when the saloon was empty and there was no one to hear her cry. Later meant new bruises to add to the collection that decorated her body like some terrible map of her failures. "I will do better next set," Zelda said, keeping her eyes down the way he liked. "You better." Marcus leaned across the bar, his breath hot on her face. "You have been making mistakes all week. People are starting to notice." Zelda wanted to laugh at that because people had been noticing for months, but they turned away because it was easier than getting involved. She had learned that lesson well in the year since Marcus had convinced her to come west with him, promising marriage and a fresh start after her father died back in Missouri. The marriage had never materialized, but the fresh start had turned into a nightmare she could not wake up from. 5 minutes, then back on stage, Marcus said, dismissing her with a wave of his hand. Zelda made her way to the back room that served as her dressing area, careful not to jar her tender shoulder where Marcus had grabbed her hard enough to leave finger-shaped bruises. The room was small and cramped, barely big enough for a chair and a cracked mirror, but it was the only place in the whole saloon where she could breathe without feeling his eyes on her. She was examining her reflection, trying to determine if she needed more powder to cover the split in her lip, when she heard footsteps behind her. Zelda spun around, her heart hammering, expecting to see Marcus standing there with that look on his face that meant pain was coming. Instead, she found herself looking up at Xavier Kendrick. He was taller than she had realized, with broad shoulders and work-roughened hands that he held up in a gesture of peace. His face was weathered from years in the sun, with lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled often, though he was not smiling now. He looked at her with such naked concern that Zelda had to look away. "I am sorry for startling you," Xavier said, his voice a low rumble that reminded her of distant thunder. "I just wanted to make sure you were all right." "I am fine," Zelda said automatically, the lie so practiced it fell from her lips without thought. "You should not be back here." "Marcus does not like men talking to me. Marcus does not like a lot of things, I suspect." Xavier took a step closer and Zelda flinched despite herself. He stopped immediately, his expression pained. "I am not going to hurt you. I know." But Zelda did not know, not really, because men said things like that all the time, and then their hands would clench into fists, and their faces would twist with rage over some imagined slight. "But you still need to leave. If Marcus finds you here, there will be trouble." "Let there be trouble, then." Xavier's jaw tightened, and Zelda saw the anger there, but it was not directed at her. "I have been watching you sing for a week now, and every night I see more pain in your eyes. Every night you move a little more carefully, like your body is one big bruise. I cannot sit back and pretend I do not see it anymore." Zelda felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, and she blinked them back furiously, because crying would make her face swell and Marcus would notice, and that would mean more trouble. "There is nothing to see. I am just clumsy." "You are a lot of things, but clumsy is not one of them," Xavier said gently. "The way you move on that stage, you are as graceful as a dancer. It is only when you are off stage that you move like every step hurts." The fact that he had noticed, really noticed, made something crack open in Zelda's chest. She wanted to tell him everything, to pour out the whole sordid story of how she had ended up trapped in this life. But fear kept her silent. Marcus had made it clear what would happen if she ever tried to leave, and she had seen enough of his temper to know he meant every word. "You need to go," Zelda said instead, wrapping her arms around herself. "Please. You are going to get us both in trouble." Xavier studied her for a long moment, and Zelda could see him weighing his options. Finally, he nodded, but he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small piece of paper. "I am staying at the boarding house on Maple Street, room 7. If you ever need help, if you ever want to get away from here, you come find me. Day or night, it does not matter. I will help you." Zelda took the paper with shaking hands, already knowing she would never use it. Men like Marcus did not let their possessions go without a fight, and that was all she was to him now, a possession to be used and discarded when he grew tired of her. "Thank you," she whispered, tucking the paper into her bodice. "But I will be fine." Xavier looked like he wanted to argue, but footsteps in the hallway made them both freeze. He gave her one last long look, his brown eyes full of promises she dared not believe, and then he was gone, slipping out the back door just as Marcus appeared in the doorway. "Who were you talking to?" Marcus demanded, his eyes narrowing. "No one," Zelda said quickly. "I was just running through my songs for the next set." Marcus stepped into the room, and Zelda fought the urge to back away because showing fear only made him angrier. He grabbed her chin, his fingers digging into the bruise he had put there, and tilted her face up toward the light. "You are a terrible liar, Zelda. Your face gets all red and blotchy when you lie." He squeezed harder, and Zelda bit back a whimper. "If I find out you have been talking to one of the customers, if I find out you have been trying to leave me, I will make you regret it. Do you understand?" "Yes," Zelda managed, tears streaming down her face now. "Good." Marcus released her and stepped back, smoothing down his vest like nothing had happened. "Now get back out there and sing. And for God's sake, try to smile. No one wants to watch a woman cry into her songs." Zelda waited until he left before allowing herself to collapse into the chair, her whole body shaking with silent sobs. She gave herself exactly 1 minute to fall apart, and then she stood up, wiped her face, reapplied her powder, and walked back out onto that stage with a smile that felt like broken glass. Xavier was back at his corner table, and when their eyes met across the crowded saloon, Zelda saw something in his expression that she had not seen in a long time. Hope. It terrified her almost as much as Marcus did, because hope was a dangerous thing for a woman in her position. Hope made you careless, made you believe in fairy tales and happy endings when the reality was that women like her did not get rescued. They just survived, day by day, bruise by bruise, until they did not anymore. But when Zelda opened her mouth to sing, she found herself looking at Xavier instead of the middle distance she usually focused on. She sang to him, pouring all her pain and fear and desperate longing into the melody, and he listened like every word mattered. For the first time in months, Zelda felt like someone actually saw her, not just the pretty face and the decent voice, but the woman underneath who was fighting to survive. The next week passed in a blur of songs and bruises. Marcus was getting worse, his temper flaring over the smallest things. He accused her of flirting with customers, of trying to steal money from the till, of deliberately singing off-key to embarrass him. None of it was true, but the truth did not matter to Marcus. What mattered was control, and he could feel it slipping. Xavier came to the saloon every night, always sitting in the same corner, always watching. Marcus had noticed him too, and the tension between the two men was thick enough to cut. Zelda tried to avoid looking at Xavier during her sets, but it was like trying not to look at the sun. Her eyes found him despite her best efforts, and every time they did, she saw that same steady concern, that same unspoken promise that she was not alone. On the 8th night, Marcus finally snapped. Zelda was singing a mournful ballad about a woman who had lost everything when Marcus stormed across the saloon floor and grabbed her arm, yanking her off the stage mid-song. The whole room went silent, every eye turning to watch as he dragged her toward the back room, his fingers digging into her already bruised flesh. "What do you think you are doing?" Marcus snarled, shoving her into the back room hard enough that she stumbled and fell. "You were looking at him again. That cowboy in the corner. Do you think I am stupid? Do you think I do not see what is happening here?" "Nothing is happening," Zelda said, scrambling to her feet. "I was just singing. That is all." "You are a liar and a whore," Marcus said, advancing on her. "I took you in when you had nothing. I gave you a job, a place to live, and this is how you repay me. By making eyes at some drifter." "I am not making eyes at anyone," Zelda protested, backing away until she hit the wall. "Please, Marcus, you are seeing things that are not there." "I know what I see." Marcus grabbed her by the throat, slamming her back against the wall hard enough that her vision went white at the edges. "You belong to me, Zelda. You are mine, and I do not share what is mine." Zelda clawed at his hands, trying to pry them away, but he was too strong. Black spots danced in her vision, and she could feel consciousness slipping away when suddenly Marcus was gone, ripped away from her by a force she could not identify. She collapsed to the floor, gasping for air, and looked up to see Xavier standing over Marcus, his fist cocked back for another punch. Marcus was on the ground, blood streaming from his nose, his eyes wide with shock. "You do not touch her," Xavier said, his voice deadly calm. "You do not ever touch her again." Marcus scrambled to his feet, reaching for the gun he kept tucked in his belt, but Xavier was faster. He knocked the weapon away and grabbed Marcus by the shirt, lifting him clear off the ground. "I could kill you right now," Xavier said conversationally, like he was discussing the weather. "I could break your neck and leave you in the alley and no one would miss you, but I am not going to do that because Zelda has seen enough violence. So here is what is going to happen instead. You are going to let her go. You are going to give her whatever wages you owe her, and you are never going to come near her again. Do you understand? She is my woman," Marcus wheezed, clawing at Xavier's hands. "You cannot just take her." "She is not property to be taken," Xavier said, shaking him like a rag doll. "She is a person, and you have been treating her like she is less than human. That ends tonight." Zelda watched the exchange through a haze of pain and disbelief. Part of her wanted to tell Xavier to stop, that he was only making things worse, but another part of her, the part that had been beaten down and broken for so long, wanted to cheer. No one had ever stood up for her like this before. No one had ever fought for her. Xavier dropped Marcus to the ground and turned to Zelda, his expression softening. "Can you walk?" Zelda nodded, not trusting her voice. "Then we are leaving." Xavier held out his hand, and after a moment's hesitation, Zelda took it. His palm was warm and calloused, and his grip was gentle despite the violence he had just displayed. He pulled her to her feet and kept his arm around her shoulders as they walked past Marcus, who was still sprawled on the floor, blood dripping from his nose. "You cannot do this," Marcus called after them, his voice ragged. "She has nowhere to go. She will come crawling back to me within a week." "I would not count on that," Xavier said without looking back. They walked out of the $silver saloon into the warm California night, and Zelda felt like she was walking through a dream. The street was quiet, most of the town already asleep, and the stars overhead were so bright they seemed to burn holes in the sky. "Are you all right?" Xavier asked once they were far enough away from the saloon that Marcus could not hear them. "I do not know," Zelda admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I do not know what I am." "You are free," Xavier said simply. "That is what you are." The word sounded foreign to Zelda's ears, like a language she had forgotten how to speak. Free. She had not been free in so long she had almost forgotten what it felt like. But standing here in the darkness with Xavier's arm around her shoulders and the taste of fresh air in her lungs, she thought maybe she could remember. "Where are we going?" she asked. "My room at the boarding house, for tonight at least," Xavier said. "You can have the bed." "I will sleep on the floor. In the morning we will figure out what comes next." Zelda stopped walking, forcing Xavier to stop too. "Why are you doing this? You do not even know me." Xavier turned to face her, and in the moonlight his eyes were dark and serious. "I know enough. I know that you are strong and brave, and you deserve better than what Marcus was giving you. I know that when you sing, you tell stories that break my heart. I know that you have been hurting for a long time, and I want to help if you will let me." "I do not have any money," Zelda said, feeling tears threaten again. "I cannot pay you back. I am not asking for payment." Xavier's thumb brushed across her cheek, wiping away a tear that had escaped. "I am just asking you to trust me, at least for tonight." Trust was a hard thing for Zelda, something that had been beaten out of her over the past year, but looking at Xavier, she found that she wanted to try. He had risked himself to save her, had stood up to Marcus when no one else would, and there was a kindness in his eyes that made her want to believe in good men again. "All right," she said finally, "for tonight." The boarding house on Maple Street was a neat two-story building run by a widow named Mrs. Patterson, who asked no questions when Xavier led Zelda up to his room. The space was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a window that looked out over the main street. Xavier lit the lamp and then immediately started pulling blankets off the bed to make himself a pallet on the floor. "You really do not have to sleep on the floor," Zelda said, feeling guilty. "I can take the floor." "Absolutely not." Xavier's tone left no room for argument. "You need rest, and that means a proper bed. Besides, I have slept in far worse places than a floor. This is luxury compared to sleeping under the stars with rattlesnakes for company." Despite everything, Zelda found herself smiling at that. "You are a cowboy, then? A real one?" "As real as they come," Xavier confirmed, settling onto his makeshift bed with a grunt. "I work for the Double K Ranch about 20 miles outside of town. We run cattle mostly, though we have a few horses too. It is hard work but honest, and I like being outside more than I like being cooped up." "Then what are you doing in Watsonville?" Zelda asked, sitting gingerly on the edge of the bed. 20 miles is a long way to come just for a drink." Xavier was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice was soft. "I came because of you." The first time I heard you sing, about 2 weeks ago, I knew I had to come back. There was something in your voice, something that spoke to me. And then I started noticing the bruises, the way you moved, and I could not stop thinking about you. I could not stop worrying. So I kept coming back, night after night, trying to work up the courage to do something. Zelda's throat tightened with emotion. You came all that way just to check on me. I know it probably sounds strange, Xavier said, a hint of embarrassment in his voice. We do not know each other, not really, but I could not stand by and watch someone hurt you. My mama raised me better than that. Your mother sounds like a wise woman. She was. Xavier's expression grew distant. She passed 5 years ago, but I still hear her voice in my head sometimes, telling me to do the right thing even when it is hard. Tonight, doing the right thing meant getting you away from Marcus. They lapsed into silence, and Zelda found herself studying Xavier's profile in the lamplight. He was handsome in a rugged way, with strong features and kind eyes, but it was more than that. There was a steadiness to him, a sense that he was exactly who he appeared to be, with no hidden cruelty waiting beneath the surface. It was so different from Marcus, who had seemed charming and attentive at first only to reveal his true nature once Zelda was dependent on him. Thank you, Zelda said quietly. For tonight, for everything. I do not think anyone has ever stood up for me like that before. Then people have not been treating you right, Xavier said firmly. You deserve to have people in your corner, Zelda. You deserve to be protected and cared for, not beaten down. The simple conviction in his words made Zelda's eyes burn with tears again. She had spent so long believing that she deserved what Marcus did to her, that somehow she had brought it on herself by being too stupid or too weak or too something. But Xavier looked at her like she was worth protecting, like her pain mattered, and it was almost too much to bear. You should get some sleep, Xavier said gently, as if sensing she was on the verge of breaking down. Tomorrow will be a big day. We will need to figure out your next steps. Zelda nodded and lay down on the bed, not even bothering to remove her dress. She was too exhausted, her body aching from Marcus's abuse and the adrenaline crash that came after their escape. Xavier turned down the lamp until it was just a soft glow, and Zelda closed her eyes, expecting nightmares. Instead, she slept better than she had in months. When Zelda woke, sunlight was streaming through the window and Xavier was already up, sitting in the chair by the window with a thoughtful expression on his face. He noticed her stirring and gave her a small smile. Morning. How do you feel? Zelda took stock of her body, cataloging the various aches and pains. Her throat was sore from where Marcus had choked her, and her arm throbbed where he had grabbed her, but overall she felt better than she had expected. Sore but alive. That is a good start. Xavier stood and moved to the washstand, pouring water into the basin. I will step outside so you can wash up and have some privacy. There is a general store down the street. I thought we could get you some new clothes, maybe some breakfast, and then we can talk about what you want to do next. I do not have money for clothes, Zelda reminded him, feeling a familiar shame creep in. I have money, Xavier said easily. And before you argue, consider it payment for all those songs you sang that made my nights in town bearable. Fair trade. Zelda wanted to argue, but the truth was she desperately needed clothes. Everything she owned was back at the saloon, and she would rather walk naked through town than go back there to retrieve them. All right, thank you. Xavier left her alone, and Zelda washed as best she could with the basin of water, studying her reflection in the small mirror above the washstand. Her face was a mess of bruises in various stages of healing, and her neck had angry red marks from Marcus's fingers. She looked like exactly what she was, a woman who had been beaten and broken, and the sight made her want to cry, but crying would not change anything. Zelda had learned that lesson well over the past year. The only thing that would change her situation was action. And for the first time in a long time, she had the opportunity to take some. When Xavier returned, they walked together to the general store, and Zelda tried not to notice the looks they got from the townspeople they passed. Watsonville was a small town where everyone knew everyone else's business, and by now word had probably spread about what happened at the Silver Dollar last night. Zelda could practically hear the gossip forming in people's minds, the assumptions they were making about her and Xavier. The general store was run by a friendly woman named Mrs. Chen, who asked no questions when Xavier explained that Zelda needed a new dress and whatever else she might require. Zelda selected a simple blue calico dress with long sleeves and a high neck, something practical and modest that would cover her bruises. Mrs. Chen threw in some undergarments and a pair of sturdy boots, and Xavier paid for everything without complaint. "You are spending too much money on me," Zelda said as they left the store, her arms full of parcels. "I am spending exactly the right amount," Xavier countered. "Besides, I do not have much to spend money on usually. I live simply, save most of my wages. It feels good to use it for something worthwhile." They returned to the boarding house so Zelda could change, and then Xavier took her to the restaurant down the street for breakfast. It was a humble establishment, but the food was hot and plentiful, and Zelda ate more than she had in days. Marcus had controlled her food along with everything else, claiming she needed to watch her figure if she wanted to keep singing, and the constant hunger had become just another form of control. "We should talk about what comes next," Xavier said, once they had finished eating. "Do you have family anywhere? Somewhere you could go?" Zelda shook her head. "My father died 2 years ago. That is how I met Marcus. He came to the funeral and seemed so kind, so understanding. He offered me a job singing at his saloon in California, promised me a fresh start. I had nothing left in Missouri, so I accepted. I thought." She trailed off, not wanting to voice how naive she had been. "You thought he would take care of you," Xavier finished gently. "That is not naive, Zelda. That is just hope, and there is nothing wrong with hope. Except when it gets you trapped with a man like Marcus. Marcus is a monster who took advantage of your grief and vulnerability," Xavier said, his jaw tightening. "That is on him, not you. You did nothing wrong." Zelda wanted to believe that, but the shame ran deep. She changed the subject before she started crying again. "What about you? Do you have family?" "Not anymore. My parents are both gone, and I was an only child. The ranch hands are the closest thing I have to family these days." Xavier leaned back in his chair, studying her. "Which brings me to an idea I have been thinking about. It is forward of me, and you are free to say no, but I want to put it out there." "All right," Zelda said cautiously. "Come back to the ranch with me. We always need help, and you could work in the main house. The boss's wife has been looking for someone to help with cooking and cleaning, and the pay is decent. You would have your own room, 3 meals a day, and you would be far enough from town that Marcus could not bother you." Zelda stared at him, trying to process the offer. It was generous, almost too generous, and part of her immediately started looking for the catch. But Xavier's face was open and honest, with no hint of ulterior motives. "Why would you do this for me?" she asked. "You do not owe me anything." "Maybe I do not owe you, but I want to help," Xavier said simply. "You need a fresh start, and I am in a position to offer one. Besides, I would rest easier knowing you were safe and away from Marcus. What about your boss? Would he be all right with hiring me? James Kowalski is a good man. He and his wife Sarah have 3 children and a ranch to run, and Sarah has been run ragged trying to keep up with everything. She will be thrilled to have the help, and James trusts my judgment. If I vouch for you, that will be enough." Zelda bit her lip, weighing her options. She could stay in Watsonville and try to find work, but the truth was her reputation was ruined now. No respectable establishment would hire a woman who had been living with a saloon owner, and she would end up right back where she started. Or she could take Xavier up on his offer and have a real chance at building a new life. "All right," she said finally. "I will come to the ranch, but I want to pay my own way. Whatever wages I earn, I want to save them so I am not dependent on anyone." "Fair enough." Xavier smiled, and Zelda felt something warm unfurl in her chest at the sight. "We can leave this afternoon if you are up for it. It is a few hours' ride, but I have a wagon and we can take it slow." They spent the rest of the morning making preparations. Xavier settled his bill with Mrs. Patterson and retrieved his horse and wagon from the livery stable. Zelda tried not to think about Marcus and what he might be planning. Part of her expected him to show up any moment, demanding she return to the saloon, but the hours passed without incident. As they were loading the wagon, a young boy ran up to them, his face flushed with exertion. "Are you Zelda Norton?" "Yes," Zelda said cautiously. "A man asked me to give you this." The boy held out a folded piece of paper and then ran off before Zelda could ask any questions. Her hands shook as she unfolded the note. The handwriting was Marcus's and the message was short and venomous. "You think you can leave me? You think that Cowboy can protect you? I will find you, Zelda, and when I do, you will wish you had stayed. You belong to me." Xavier read the note over her shoulder and his expression hardened. "He is trying to scare you." "It is working," Zelda admitted, her voice trembling. "The ranch is 20 miles from here, and Marcus is a saloon owner, not a tracker. He does not have the skills or the inclination to come after you. He is just lashing out because he lost control." Xavier crumpled the note and tossed it aside. "You are safe with me, Zelda. I promise you that." Zelda wanted to believe him, but fear had been her constant companion for so long it was hard to shake. Still, what choice did she have? She could not stay in Watsonville, and she could not go back to Marcus. The only way forward was to trust Xavier and hope that he was right. They climbed into the wagon, and Xavier urged the horses forward, leaving Watsonville behind. Zelda kept looking back over her shoulder, expecting to see Marcus following them, but the road remained empty. Slowly, gradually, she allowed herself to relax, to believe that maybe, just maybe, she had actually escaped. The ride to the ranch took about 3 hours, and Xavier spent most of that time telling Zelda about the Double K and the people who lived there. James and Sarah Kowalski had owned the ranch for 10 years, building it up from nothing through hard work and determination. They had 3 children, 2 boys and a girl, ranging in age from 4 to 9. There were about a dozen ranch hands who lived in the bunkhouse, all good men who worked hard and kept to themselves. "What will they think of me?" Zelda asked as they crested a hill, and she got her first glimpse of the ranch spread out in the valley below. It was larger than she had expected, with a sprawling main house, a big red barn, and several outbuildings. "They will think you are someone who needs a fresh start, same as most of us," Xavier said. "Half the men working on the ranch are running from something, whether it is a bad past or bad choices or just bad luck. James does not care where you came from as long as you are willing to work hard and treat people with respect." The main house was a 2-story structure with a wide porch and flower boxes in the windows. As the wagon pulled up, a woman emerged from the house, wiping her hands on her apron. She was in her early 30s with brown hair pulled back in a practical bun, and a warm smile that put Zelda immediately at ease. "Xavier, we were not expecting you back so soon." The woman's gaze shifted to Zelda, taking in her bruised face and nervous demeanor, and her expression softened with understanding. "And who is this?" "Sarah, this is Zelda Norton." "Zelda, this is Sarah Kowalski, the lady of the house." Xavier helped Zelda down from the wagon, keeping a steadying hand on her elbow. I told Zelda you were looking for help around the house. She is a hard worker and a good person, and she needs a place to stay. Sarah studied Zelda for a long moment, and Zelda forced herself to meet the other woman's gaze despite the shame that burned in her chest. She knew what Sarah must see, a battered woman running from trouble, and she braced herself for rejection. Instead, Sarah stepped forward and took Zelda's hands in hers. "You are welcome here, Zelda. Any friend of Xavier's is a friend of ours. Come inside and I will show you where you will be staying." The kindness in Sarah's voice made Zelda's throat tighten with emotion. She followed Sarah into the house while Xavier dealt with the wagon, and found herself in a warm, lived-in space that smelled like fresh bread and coffee. Children's toys were scattered across the floor, and the walls were decorated with simple drawings and family photographs. "I apologize for the mess," Sarah said, though she did not sound particularly apologetic. "With 3 children and a ranch to run, keeping the house spotless is a losing battle." "It is wonderful," Zelda said honestly. The house felt like a home in a way the silver dollar never had, with love and laughter baked into the very walls. Sarah led her upstairs to a small but clean room with a window overlooking the pastures. There was a bed with a colorful quilt, a dresser, and a washstand, everything simple but well made. "This will be your room," Sarah said. "The children sometimes get loud in the morning, so I apologize in advance for that. Dinner is at 6, breakfast at 6, and lunch at noon. You will eat with the family, not separately. I do not hold with that kind of division. As for work, I will need help with cooking, cleaning, laundry, and watching the children when I have to go into town or help James with ranch business. Does that sound acceptable?" "More than acceptable," Zelda said, hardly able to believe her good fortune. "Thank you, Mrs. Kowalski. You do not know what this means to me. Please call me Sarah, and I think I have some idea." Sarah's gaze was knowing. "I was not always a ranch wife. I had my own troubles before I met James. Sometimes we all need someone to give us a chance to start over." After Sarah left, Zelda sat on the bed and allowed herself to cry, but this time the tears were not from pain or fear. They were tears of relief, of gratitude, of something that might have been hope stirring back to life in her chest. She had spent so long believing that her life was over, that she would never escape Marcus and the hell he had created for her. But here she was, in a safe place with kind people who wanted to help her. Dinner that night was a boisterous affair with the 3 Kowalski children competing for attention, and James telling stories about his day on the ranch. Zelda sat between Sarah and Xavier, picking at her food and feeling out of place, despite everyone's efforts to make her feel welcome. The children, especially the youngest, a girl named Emily, kept staring at Zelda's bruises with wide, curious eyes until James gently told them it was not polite to stare. After dinner, Xavier walked Zelda out to the porch and they sat together on the steps watching the sun set over the California hills. The air was cooling down from the heat of the day, and somewhere in the distance, Zelda could hear cattle lowing. "How are you holding up?" Xavier asked. "I am not sure," Zelda admitted. "It all feels like a dream. Yesterday I was trapped in that saloon and today I am here. I keep waiting to wake up and find out none of this is real." "It is real," Xavier assured her, "and you are going to be all right. Sarah and James are good people and they will take care of you, and I am just in the bunkhouse if you ever need anything." Zelda turned to look at him, this man who had changed her entire life in the span of a single night. "Why did you do it, Xavier? Really? You could have just walked away." "Most people would have." Xavier was quiet for a moment, staring out at the darkening sky. When he spoke, his voice was soft but certain. "My father used to beat my mother. Not often and never where people could see, but I knew. I heard the sounds coming from their room, saw the way she would move carefully the next day. I was just a boy, too young to stop him, too scared to try. And then one day he hit her so hard she fell down the stairs and broke her neck. It was ruled an accident, but I knew the truth. Zelda's heart broke for the boy Xavier had been, helpless and afraid. I am so sorry. I swore that day that if I ever had the chance to help someone in a situation like my mother's, I would do it. I would not turn away like everyone else did. Xavier looked at her, his eyes shining with unshed tears. So when I saw you in that saloon, hurting and afraid, I could not walk away. I would not. Maybe I could not save my mother, but I could save you. Without thinking, Zelda reached out and took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. Xavier looked down at their joined hands in surprise, and then he smiled, that warm, genuine smile that made Zelda's heart skip a beat. "Thank you," she whispered, "for saving me, for giving me a chance at a real life." "You saved yourself," Xavier said. "You survived a year with Marcus. You kept singing even when it hurt. You are the bravest person I know, Zelda Norton." They sat like that until full dark, hand in hand, neither one speaking because there was nothing more that needed to be said. For the first time in longer than she could remember, Zelda felt safe. She felt seen. And as she looked at Xavier's profile in the moonlight, she felt something else too, something warm and fragile and terrifying. She felt like maybe, someday, she could love again. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity as Zelda settled into her new life at the Double K Ranch. The work was hard, but it was honest work, and she found a strange satisfaction in it. She woke early to help Sarah prepare breakfast for the family and the ranch hands, spent her mornings cleaning and doing laundry, and her afternoons watching the children or helping to prepare dinner. It was exhausting, but it was also healing, each day a step further away from the nightmare of her life with Marcus. The bruises faded slowly, the purple and black giving way to green and yellow before finally disappearing altogether. As her body healed, Zelda found that her spirit was healing too. She laughed at the children's antics, joined in conversations at dinner, and slowly began to believe that she was more than just a victim. She was a survivor, and she was building a new life on her own terms. Xavier was a constant presence in those early weeks, always nearby but never pushy. He would stop by the house in the evenings after work, ostensibly to visit with James, but really, Zelda suspected, to check on her. They would sit on the porch together, talking about their days, and Zelda found herself looking forward to those moments more and more. He told her about his life as a cowboy, the long days on horseback, and the satisfaction of working with animals. She told him about her childhood in Missouri, about her mother who had died when she was young and her father who had done his best to raise her alone. They talked about books and music, about dreams and disappointments, and with every conversation, Zelda felt herself drawn more deeply into Xavier's orbit. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. She had sworn she would never trust a man again after Marcus, but Xavier made it easy to forget that vow. He was patient and kind, never pressuring her for more than she was willing to give, and the respect he showed her was like water to a parched soul. One evening about a month after Zelda arrived at the ranch, Xavier showed up at the house carrying a guitar. "I heard from Sarah that you used to sing," he said, looking almost shy. "I thought maybe you might want to try again. No pressure, just if you feel like it." Zelda stared at the instrument, feeling a complicated mix of emotions. She had not sung since the night Xavier rescued her from the silver dollar, and part of her never wanted to sing again. Music had become so tangled up with pain and fear that she was not sure she could separate the two anymore. But another part of her missed it desperately. Singing had been her joy before Marcus, the thing that made her feel most alive, and she hated that he had taken that from her along with everything else. "I do not know if I can," Zelda said honestly. "That is all right," Xavier said, setting the guitar down on the porch. "But if you ever want to try, it is here." He did not push, did not try to convince her, just left the offer hanging there like a gift. And that night, after everyone else had gone to bed, Zelda found herself sitting on the porch with the guitar in her hands. Her fingers remembered the chords even if her heart was not sure, and she started to play, softly at first and then with more confidence. The song that came out was one she had written years ago, before Marcus, about hope and new beginnings. Her voice cracked on the first few notes, rusty from disuse, but she pushed through, and by the end she was crying and laughing at the same time because it felt so good to sing again, to reclaim this part of herself that she thought was lost forever. She did not realize Xavier was there until she finished and looked up to find him standing at the edge of the porch, his expression full of wonder. "That was beautiful," he said softly. "I forgot how much I missed it," Zelda said, wiping at her tears. "How much I needed it." "Music should bring joy, not pain," Xavier said, coming to sit beside her. "I am glad you are finding the joy again." "I am finding a lot of things again," Zelda said, looking at him. "Thanks to you." Xavier reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch gentle. "You are doing all the hard work. I just gave you a safe place to do it." Zelda leaned into his touch without thinking, and Xavier's breath caught. They stayed like that for a long moment, frozen in the space between friendship and something more, and then Zelda pulled back, suddenly scared. "I am sorry," she said quickly. "I should not have. Do not apologize," Xavier interrupted. "But I do not want to rush you, Zelda. You have been through hell and you need time to heal. I am not going anywhere. Whatever you need, however long it takes, I am here." The promise in his words made Zelda's heart swell with an emotion she was not quite ready to name. She nodded, not trusting her voice, and they sat together in companionable silence until the night grew cold and they both went to bed. Summer gave way to fall, and the ranch became a riot of activity as they prepared for the coming winter. Zelda threw herself into the work, helping Sarah preserve vegetables and can fruit, mending clothes and blankets, and learning how to manage a household on the frontier. She discovered she had a knack for organization, and Sarah began relying on her more and more to handle the day-to-day running of the house. The children adored her, especially Emily, who followed Zelda around like a shadow. Zelda would tell them stories and sing them songs, and in their unconditional affection, she found a kind of healing she had not expected. They did not care about her past or her scars. They just loved her for who she was in the present, and that was a powerful gift. Xavier continued his evening visits, and Zelda found herself opening up to him more and more. She told him about her year with Marcus in detail she had never shared with anyone, the fear and the pain and the shame. Xavier listened without judgment, his quiet presence a balm to her wounded soul. "Do you ever wish you had just left me there?" Zelda asked one night, voicing a fear that had been nagging at her. "I am sure I have complicated your life." "Not for a second," Xavier said firmly. "Zelda, you are the best thing that has happened to me in a long time. Getting to know you, watching you heal and grow strong again, it has been a privilege." "I do not feel very strong most days," Zelda admitted. "Then you are not seeing what I see," Xavier said. "You survived something that would have broken most people. You got up every day and sang even when it hurt, and now you are building a whole new life from nothing. That is strength, Zelda. That is courage." Zelda wanted to believe him, and with each passing day it got a little easier. The nightmares that had plagued her in those first weeks became less frequent. She stopped flinching every time a man raised his voice. She started to recognize her own reflection again, to see the woman she had been before Marcus instead of just the broken victim. And she started to realize that what she felt for Xavier was not just gratitude. It was something deeper, something that made her heart race and her palms sweat. She was falling in love with him, and the realization terrified her. Love had been her downfall with Marcus. She had loved him, or thought she did, and he had used that love against her, twisting it into a weapon to control her. How could she trust her own judgment again? How could she know that Xavier was different? But the truth was, she already knew. Xavier had proven himself time and again, in 1,000 small ways. He respected her boundaries, celebrated her victories, and supported her through her struggles. He made her laugh and made her feel safe, and when she looked at him, she saw not a savior but a partner, someone who valued her as an equal. The realization came to a head on a crisp October evening when Xavier invited her to go for a ride. They saddled up 2 horses and rode out to a meadow about a mile from the ranch house, where wildflowers still bloomed despite the cooling temperatures. Xavier spread a blanket on the ground, and they sat watching the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. "I have been thinking," Xavier said after a long silence, "about us." Zelda's heart began to pound. "What about us?" "I think you know how I feel about you, Zelda. I have tried to be patient, to give you space to heal, but I cannot keep pretending that what I feel is just friendship." Xavier turned to face her, his expression serious. "I am in love with you. I have been for weeks now, maybe longer. And I know you have been hurt. I know you have every reason to be cautious, but I need you to know that I am not Marcus. I will never hurt you the way he did. I will spend the rest of my life proving that to you if you will let me." Zelda felt tears spill down her cheeks, but for once they were tears of joy instead of pain. "I love you too," she whispered. "I have been so scared to admit it, even to myself, but I do. I love you, Xavier." Xavier reached out and cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs gently wiping away her tears. "You do not have to be scared, not with me, not ever." And then he kissed her, soft and sweet and full of promise. It was nothing like the rough, demanding kisses Marcus had forced on her. This was gentle and respectful, asking rather than taking, and Zelda felt something inside her unlock. She kissed him back, pouring all her hope and fear and love into that single moment, and Xavier held her like she was something precious. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard, and Zelda was smiling through her tears. "I want this," she said, her voice shaking but certain. "I want you. I want a future with you." "Then that is what we will have," Xavier promised. "Whatever that looks like, whatever you need, we will figure it out together." They stayed in the meadow until the stars came out, wrapped in each other's arms and talking about the future. Xavier wanted to save up enough money to buy his own piece of land someday, to build a ranch where they could raise horses and maybe a family. Zelda wanted to keep singing, to find the joy in music again without the shadow of fear hanging over her. They dreamed together, weaving a future out of words and hope, and for the first time in so long, Zelda believed that happiness was possible. When they rode back to the ranch, hand in hand, Sarah was waiting on the porch with a knowing smile. "I was wondering when you two would figure it out," she said teasingly. "You have been dancing around each other for weeks. Are we that obvious?" Zelda asked, blushing. "Painfully," Sarah confirmed, but her tone was warm. "I am happy for you both. You deserve good things, Zelda." That night, Zelda lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her mind too full to sleep. She kept replaying the kiss in her mind, the feeling of Xavier's arms around her, the promises they had made to each other. It felt like a dream, but unlike her dreams with Marcus, this one did not have a dark underbelly. This one was real and solid and good. The next few months were the happiest of Zelda's life. She and Xavier courted properly, under the watchful but approving eyes of James and Sarah. They went on rides together, shared meals, and spent their evenings on the porch talking and laughing. Xavier taught her how to rope cattle and ride like a real cowgirl, and Zelda taught him the songs her mother had sung to her as a child. Winter came, bringing cold nights and occasional snow, and Zelda discovered she loved the ranch even in the harsh weather. There was something satisfying about being warm and safe inside while the wind howled outside, knowing that she had helped prepare for this, that she had contributed to the household's survival. Christmas was a revelation. The Kowalski family went all out, decorating the house with pine boughs and candles, and Sarah cooked a feast that seemed to go on forever. Xavier gave Zelda a beautiful necklace with a small turquoise stone, and she gave him a scarf she had knitted herself, spending weeks on it in secret. They exchanged gifts in front of the whole family, and when Xavier fastened the necklace around her throat, his fingers lingering on her skin, Zelda felt like the luckiest woman alive. But their happiness was not without its shadows. In late January, a stranger showed up at the ranch asking questions about Zelda. He was a rough-looking man with cold eyes, and he told James he was looking for a woman who had run away from her employer in Watsonville. James, to his credit, told the man he had not seen anyone matching that description and sent him on his way, but the visit shook Zelda badly. She knew, even without being told, that Marcus had sent the man. He was still looking for her, still trying to drag her back into his control. "I am not going to let him take you," Xavier said fiercely when she told him about her fears. "I will protect you, Zelda. We all will." "What if he comes himself?" Zelda asked, hating the tremor in her voice. "What if he brings the law? I lived with him for a year." "He could claim I stole from him or owe him money." "Then we will deal with it," Xavier said. "But you are not going back to him. I would die before I let that happen." The vehemence in his voice should have frightened her, but instead it made her feel safe. Xavier was not violent by nature, but he was a protector, and he would do whatever it took to keep her safe. As it turned out, Marcus did come, but not in the way Zelda had expected. It was a cold February morning when he showed up at the ranch, not with the law but alone and clearly drunk. He stumbled up to the main house demanding to see Zelda, shouting that she belonged to him. Xavier was in the barn when it happened, but he heard the commotion and came running. By the time he arrived, James had already stepped between Marcus and the house, his rifle in hand. "You need to leave," James said calmly but firmly. "Zelda does not want to see you, and you are not welcome here." "She is my woman," Marcus slurred, swaying on his feet. "She owes me for the year I took care of her. I want her back." "Zelda does not owe you anything," Xavier said, coming to stand beside James. "And she is not property to be claimed. She is a free woman and she has made her choice. Now you can leave on your own or we can help you leave. Your choice." Marcus's face twisted with rage, and he reached for the gun tucked in his belt. But he was drunk and slow, and before he could draw it, Xavier had closed the distance and knocked him to the ground. The gun went flying, and James quickly picked it up while Xavier pinned Marcus to the dirt. "You made a big mistake coming here," Xavier said, his voice low and dangerous. "Zelda is under our protection, and if you ever come near her again, if you ever threaten her or try to hurt her, I will make sure you regret it. Do you understand me?" Marcus spit blood and nodded, his bravado draining away now that he was face down in the mud. Xavier hauled him to his feet and physically threw him onto his horse, sending him off with a warning that if he ever came back, he would not be leaving on his own 2 feet. Zelda watched the whole thing from the window, her heart in her throat, and when it was over, she ran outside and threw herself into Xavier's arms. "It is over," Xavier murmured into her hair. He is gone and he is not coming back. How can you be sure? Zelda asked, her voice muffled against his chest. Because he is a coward who only feels powerful when he is hitting someone who cannot fight back, Xavier said. When faced with real opposition, men like him crumble. He will slink back to Watsonville and find some other poor woman to victimize, but he will not bother you again. I promise. Zelda wanted to believe him, and in the days that followed, it became easier. Marcus did not return, and word eventually filtered back that he had sold the silver dollar and left California altogether. Zelda allowed herself to breathe, to truly believe that she was free. Spring came early that year, bringing wildflowers and warm breezes. Zelda celebrated her 23rd birthday in April, and Xavier, who was 26, told her he had a special gift for her. He took her out to the meadow where they had first confessed their love, and there, with the flowers blooming all around them and the sun warm on their faces, he got down on one knee. Zelda Norton, you are the strongest, bravest, most beautiful woman I have ever known, Xavier said, pulling a simple gold band from his pocket. I want to spend the rest of my life making you happy, protecting you, and loving you. Will you marry me? Zelda did not even have to think about it. Yes, she said, tears streaming down her face. Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes. Xavier slipped the ring onto her finger and stood, sweeping her into his arms and spinning her around while she laughed and cried at the same time. It was a perfect moment, unmarred by fear or doubt, just pure joy and love. They were married in June in a simple ceremony at the ranch. Sarah made Zelda a beautiful dress out of white cotton, and the children picked wildflowers to decorate the porch. The whole ranch turned out for the celebration, along with half the town of Watsonville, people who had come to know and respect Zelda in the months since her escape from Marcus. Zelda sang at her own wedding, a song she had written for Xavier about second chances and finding home in unexpected places. Her voice was clear and strong, with no trace of the pain that had once colored every note, and when she finished, there was not a dry eye in the house. James had given them a wedding present that took both of them by surprise, a piece of land on the edge of the Double K property and enough lumber to start building a house. You have both earned it, James said when Xavier tried to protest. Besides, I am selfish. I want to keep Zelda close because Sarah would be lost without her help. Xavier and Zelda threw themselves into building their home, working side by side through the summer heat. It was hard work, but it was also joyful, each nail driven a statement of their commitment to each other and their future. By September, they had a small but sturdy house with 2 bedrooms, a kitchen and a parlor, enough space for them and the family they hoped to have someday. They moved in on a golden autumn afternoon, and that night, Zelda stood in the middle of their new parlor and cried happy tears. This was hers, truly hers, in a way nothing had been since her father died. She had built this life with her own hands, had fought for it and earned it, and no one could take it away from her. "What are you thinking?" Xavier asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "I am thinking about how far I have come," Zelda said, leaning back against him. "A year and a half ago I was trapped and hopeless. I thought my life was over, and now look at me. I have a home, a husband, a family. I have joy again." "You always had joy," Xavier said softly. "It was just buried under fear and pain, but it was always there, waiting for you to reclaim it." Zelda turned in his arms to face him, reaching up to cup his face in her hands. "I could not have done it without you. You saved me, Xavier." "We saved each other," Xavier corrected. "You gave me purpose, Zelda. You gave me someone to fight for, someone to build a life with. Before you, I was just drifting. Now I have everything I ever wanted." They kissed as the sun set outside their new home, and Zelda felt a bone-deep contentment settle over her. This was what she had been searching for all along, not just safety but partnership, not just survival but love. The years that followed were good ones. Zelda continued to help Sarah at the main house while also building a life of her own. She started giving music lessons to the children in the area, teaching them the songs her mother had taught her, and word spread quickly about the beautiful singing teacher at the Double K Ranch. She found joy in sharing her love of music with others, in watching children light up when they hit the right note or mastered a difficult melody. Xavier worked hard to build up their small ranch, raising horses that quickly gained a reputation for their quality and temperament. He and Zelda worked as a team, each supporting the other's dreams, and their partnership became the envy of everyone who knew them. In the spring of 1884, Zelda discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with equal parts joy and terror because she knew nothing about being a mother, but Xavier was over the moon. He built a cradle with his own hands, sanding it until it was smooth as silk, and Sarah gave her advice and reassurance whenever Zelda's fears threatened to overwhelm her. Their daughter was born in December, a healthy baby girl with Xavier's dark eyes and Zelda's delicate features. They named her Grace because she was a gift of grace after all the darkness they had endured. And from the moment Zelda held her daughter in her arms, she knew that this was what she had been fighting for all along. Not just her own freedom, but the freedom to build a family with love instead of fear. Xavier was a devoted father, doting on Grace while also respecting Zelda's instincts as a mother. They navigated the sleepless nights and constant demands of a newborn together, and if anything, the experience brought them even closer. Zelda watched Xavier with their daughter and fell in love with him all over again, seeing the gentleness and patience that came so naturally to him. Grace was followed by a son 2 years later, a rowdy boy they named Andrew after Xavier's father, in an act of forgiveness and healing that Zelda knew cost him something but also freed him. And then another daughter 3 years after that, little Rose, who had Zelda's voice and Xavier's stubborn streak. Their home was always full of noise and laughter, with children running in and out and music filling every corner. Zelda sang to her children the way her mother had sung to her, passing down the songs and stories, and she taught them about strength and courage by example. She never hid her past from them, believing that honesty was the best policy, and as they grew older, she told them about Marcus and the silver dollar and the cowboy who had saved her life. "You saved yourself, Mama," Grace said when she was old enough to understand. "Papa just gave you a safe place to land." Zelda smiled at the wisdom in her daughter's words, recognizing the truth in them. She had saved herself, making the choice to accept Xavier's help, to leave Marcus to build a new life. Xavier had been the catalyst, but the strength had always been inside her. Xavier continued to be her rock through all the ups and downs of life. When Sarah died suddenly of pneumonia in 1890, leaving James heartbroken and the ranch in chaos, Xavier and Zelda stepped up to help however they could. When a bad drought in 1891 threatened their livelihood, they worked together to find solutions, hauling water from the creek and rationing every drop. And when Zelda's nightmares returned occasionally, usually triggered by some random event or anniversary, Xavier was there to hold her and remind her that she was safe. The children grew up strong and healthy, shaped by the love and stability of their parents' marriage. Grace became a teacher, following in her mother's footsteps by sharing her love of learning with others. Andrew took over the horse breeding operation, expanding it beyond what Xavier had ever dreamed possible. And Rose, sweet Rose, became a singer like her mother, her voice so pure and clear that people came from miles around to hear her perform. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Xavier took Zelda back to the meadow where he had proposed. They were older now, with lines on their faces and gray in their hair, but the love between them burned as bright as ever. "You ever regret it?" Xavier asked as they sat on a blanket watching the sunset, just like they had so many times before. "Marrying me, staying here, building this life." Zelda looked at him in surprise. "Never, not even for a moment. This life with you, our children, our home, it is everything I ever wanted. It is more than I ever dreamed possible. Even after everything with Marcus, even with all the pain you went through." "Especially because of that," Zelda said firmly. "That pain taught me how strong I am. It taught me what real love looks like by showing me what it does not look like. And it brought me to you. So no, I do not regret any of it, because it all led me here." Xavier pulled her close, and they watched the sun sink below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant shades of red and gold. Zelda thought about the frightened, broken woman she had been all those years ago, singing in a saloon while her body ached with bruises. She thought about the cowboy who had heard the pain in every note and refused to look away. And she thought about the life they had built together, brick by brick, day by day, founded on trust and respect and a love that had weathered every storm. "I love you," Zelda said, the words as true now as they had been the first time she said them. "I love you too," Xavier replied. "Always have, always will." They stayed in the meadow until the stars came out, two people who had found each other in the darkest of times and created something beautiful from the ashes of pain. Zelda's bruises had healed long ago, but the lessons they taught her remained. She was strong. She was worthy. She was loved. And that was the greatest gift of all. Years continued to pass, bringing with them the natural progression of life. The children grew up and had families of their own, filling Xavier and Zelda's home with grandchildren who brought new life and laughter into their golden years. The ranch prospered under Andrew's management, and Grace's school became a cornerstone of the community. Rose toured throughout California, her voice bringing joy to thousands, but she always came home to the ranch, to the family that had given her wings to fly. James Kowalski passed away peacefully in his sleep in 1895, and Xavier and Zelda were there for the funeral, mourning the loss of the man who had given them both so much. The Double K passed to James's oldest son, but the relationship between the two families remained strong, bound by years of shared history and mutual respect. Xavier and Zelda spent their later years doing the things they loved, working with horses, teaching music, and spoiling their grandchildren. They took long rides through the California hills, Zelda still singing the songs that had sustained her through the darkest times. But now, those songs were filled with joy instead of pain. On a warm summer evening in 1902, when Zelda was 63 and Xavier was 66, they sat together on the porch of their home, watching their grandchildren play in the yard. The sun was setting, casting everything in a golden glow, and Zelda leaned against Xavier's shoulder with a contented sigh. "We built a good life," she said softly. "The best life," Xavier agreed, his arm tightening around her. "I would not change a single thing, even the hard parts." "Especially the hard parts," Xavier said, echoing her words from so many years ago. "Because they made us who we are. They taught us what matters." Zelda smiled, thinking about the journey that had brought them to this moment. From a dark saloon in Watsonville to this porch, from bruises and fear to love and joy, she had traveled further than she ever imagined possible. And through it all, Xavier had been there, her partner, her protector, her love. "Thank you," Zelda said, looking up at him. "For what?" "For hearing the pain in my songs, for not looking away, for giving me a chance at happiness when I thought it was impossible." Xavier cupped her face in his hands, his touch still gentle after all these years. "Thank you for trusting me, for taking a chance on a cowboy who fell in love with your voice, for building this beautiful life with me." They kissed as the sun set, surrounded by the sounds of their grandchildren's laughter and the sweet California breeze. Two souls who had found each other in the darkness and created a light that would shine for generations. The saloon singer had hidden her bruises beneath her gown, but the cowboy had heard the pain in every note, and together they had transformed that pain into something beautiful. As night fell over the ranch, Zelda and Xavier sat hand in hand, watching the stars emerge one by one. They had weathered storms and celebrated triumphs, raised children and built a legacy, and through it all, their love had remained constant and true. It was a love forged in adversity and strengthened by choice, a love that had healed wounds and built dreams, a love that would endure long after they were gone, living on in the hearts of their children and grandchildren. Zelda sang softly, one last song as the darkness deepened, and Xavier listened with the same rapt attention he had given her that first night in the Silver Dollar Saloon. Her voice was older now, touched with the years, but it was still beautiful, still full of the strength and courage that defined her. And in every note, Xavier heard not pain but triumph, not fear but love, the story of a woman who had survived the worst and found the best, who had taken her broken pieces and built something whole. When the song ended, they sat in comfortable silence, two hearts beating as one, grateful for every moment they had been given, every challenge they had overcome, every joy they had shared. The stars wheeled overhead, eternal and unchanging, and below them, in a small house on a California ranch, two people who had once been strangers held each other close and knew, with absolute certainty, that they were home. Their love story became legend in Watsonville and the surrounding areas, told and retold until it took on the quality of a fairy tale. The saloon singer who escaped her abuser and the cowboy who saved her, building a life of love and happiness together. But to Xavier and Zelda, it was never a fairy tale. It was real and raw and hard-won, every moment of joy earned through courage and determination, and an unwavering commitment to each other. And that, in the end, was the true magic of their story, not that it was perfect, but that it was real, a testament to the power of love to heal and transform, to turn pain into strength and darkness into light. The bruises faded, but the love remained, growing deeper and stronger with each passing year, until it became the foundation upon which an entire family, an entire legacy was built. As they grew older still, their love story continued to inspire those around them. Young couples would seek their advice, wanting to know the secret to a marriage that had lasted so long and stayed so strong. Zelda and Xavier always gave the same answer, simple but profound: respect, communication, and choosing each other every single day, even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. In 1905, the town of Watsonville held a celebration for Xavier and Zelda's 25th wedding anniversary, a testament to how beloved they had become in the community. The whole town turned out, bringing food and gifts, and Rose sang while Grace organized games for the children and Andrew gave rides on the beautiful horses he had bred. It was a joyous occasion, filled with laughter and love, and as Zelda looked around at all the faces at the community that had become her family, she felt overwhelmed with gratitude. Xavier stood beside her through it all, his hand never leaving hers, his eyes always finding hers across the crowd. They had been through so much together, weathered so many storms, and yet here they stood, still in love, still partners, still each other's safe harbor in a sometimes turbulent world. That night, as they lay in bed in the darkness, Zelda turned to Xavier and said, "I am the luckiest woman alive." "I think I am the lucky one," Xavier replied, pulling her close. "You gave me everything, Zelda. A home, a family, a purpose. You gave me love when I did not even know I was looking for it." "We gave those things to each other," Zelda said, her hand resting over his heart, feeling it beat steady and strong. "That is what partnership means. That is what love means." They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms. Two people who had found each other against all odds and built something lasting and true. And as they slept, the moon rose over the California hills, casting silver light over the ranch, over the house they had built with their own hands, over the land that had become their home and their legacy. The years continued their steady march, bringing changes both large and small. Xavier's hair went completely white, but his strength remained, and he still worked with the horses every day, finding joy in the work of his hands. Zelda's voice grew richer with age, taking on the depth that only a life fully lived could bring, and she continued to teach and perform, sharing her gift with anyone who wanted to learn. They took trips together, exploring California, visiting their children and grandchildren who had scattered across the state. They went to San Francisco and marveled at the city's growth, to the coast where they walked on the beach and watched the waves crash against the shore. Every adventure was made sweeter by sharing it together, every memory more precious because it was theirs. On their 30th anniversary, Xavier gifted Zelda with a beautiful piano, an extravagant purchase that he had been saving for years. Zelda cried when she saw it, not just because of the gift itself, but because of what it represented: Xavier's unwavering support of her music, his recognition that it was not just a hobby but a vital part of who she was. She played for him that night, her fingers flying over the keys while she sang, and Xavier listened with tears in his eyes because even after 30 years, her voice could still move him to his core. She sang of love and loss, of pain transformed into beauty, of two souls finding each other in the darkness, and every note was a gift, every word a prayer of thanksgiving. As they moved into their 70s, their pace slowed but their love never did. They spent more time sitting on the porch, less time working, but the quality of their time together only deepened. They talked for hours, sharing memories and dreams, laughing at old jokes and creating new ones. They held hands like teenagers, stole kisses in the kitchen, and still looked at each other with the same love and desire that had brought them together all those years ago. Their children and grandchildren marveled at the way Xavier would still bring Zelda wildflowers from the meadow, at the way Zelda would still sing Xavier to sleep when he was troubled. It was a love that defied time and circumstance, a love that had not just survived but thrived, growing richer and more beautiful with each passing year. In 1912, on a crisp autumn morning, Xavier woke up feeling strange. There was a pressure in his chest, a tightness that would not go away, but he said nothing to Zelda, not wanting to worry her. They spent the day together doing simple things, taking a short walk, having lunch, sitting on the porch watching the world go by. As the sun began to set, Xavier turned to Zelda and took her hand. "I want you to know something," he said, his voice serious. "What is it?" Zelda asked, concerned by his tone. "I want you to know that every single day I spent with you was a gift. Every moment, every laugh, every tear, all of it was worth it. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Zelda Norton Kendrick, and I would do it all again in a heartbeat." Zelda felt tears prick at her eyes. "Xavier, you are scaring me. Why are you talking like this?" "I am not trying to scare you," Xavier said gently. "I just want to make sure you know how much I love you, how grateful I am for the life we built together. I want you to know that if my time comes tomorrow or 20 years from now, I will die a happy man because I got to love you." "You are going to be fine," Zelda said fiercely, gripping his hand tighter. "We still have years ahead of us, decades." Xavier smiled, that warm, genuine smile that had first captured her heart. "I hope so. But if not, promise me something, anything. Promise me you will keep singing. Promise me you will keep living, keep loving, keep being the amazing woman you are. Do not let grief swallow you the way fear once did. You are too strong for that, too vibrant." "I promise," Zelda whispered, though the words felt like broken glass in her throat. They sat together until the stars came out, and then Xavier stood, pulling Zelda to her feet. "Dance with me," he said. Even though there was no music, Zelda went into his arms and they swayed together on the porch, moving to a rhythm only they could hear. She rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, memorizing the feeling of his arms around her, the scent of him, the solid strength of his body against hers. "I love you," she said. "I love you too," Xavier replied. "Always and forever." They went to bed that night wrapped around each other, and when morning came, Xavier did not wake up. He had passed peacefully in his sleep, his heart finally giving out after 76 years of steady beating. Zelda woke to find him gone, and the sound of her grief echoed through the house, bringing their children and grandchildren running. The funeral was one of the largest Watsonville had ever seen, with hundreds of people turning out to pay their respects to a man who had lived with honor and integrity, who had been a devoted husband, father, and friend. Zelda stood at the graveside, her children and grandchildren surrounding her, and sang one last song for Xavier, a song of love and gratitude and the promise that they would meet again someday. In the days and weeks that followed, Zelda grieved deeply but not without hope. She missed Xavier with an ache that never fully went away, but she remembered her promise to him. She kept singing, kept teaching, kept living. She poured her grief into her music, transforming it into something beautiful, and in doing so, she honored Xavier's memory. She lived for another 8 years. Years filled with her children and grandchildren, with music and laughter and the quiet satisfaction of a life well lived. She told stories about Xavier to anyone who would listen, keeping his memory alive, making sure that the grandchildren who had been too young to know him well understood what an extraordinary man he had been. And every evening, she would sit on the porch of the home they had built together, watching the sun set over the California hills, and she would sing. Sometimes the songs were sad, filled with longing for the man she had lost. But more often they were joyful, celebrating the incredible gift of the years they had shared, the love that had transformed her life, the happiness she had found in the most unexpected of places. On a warm spring evening in 1920, Zelda Norton Kendrick took her last breath, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, her great-grandchildren playing in the yard outside. She was 81 years old, and she died with a smile on her face, her last words a whisper that only her daughter Grace heard. "I am coming, Xavier. Wait for me." They buried her next to Xavier in the Watsonville Cemetery, under a tree that bloomed with white flowers every spring. The headstone reads simply, "Zelda Norton Kendrick, beloved wife, mother, grandmother, teacher, and singer. She turned pain into beauty and darkness into light." And there, in that quiet corner of California, their love story came to an end but also to a beginning because their legacy lived on. Their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren carried forward the lessons they had taught, about courage and resilience, about the power of love to heal and transform, about choosing kindness even in the face of cruelty. The house Xavier and Zelda built still stands today, maintained by their descendants as a testament to what two people can create when they choose love over fear, partnership over control, hope over despair. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the wind is just right, people swear they can hear singing, a woman's voice pure and clear, filled with joy and love, and the kind of peace that only comes from a life fully lived. The saloon singer who hid bruises beneath her gown had found healing and hope through the cowboy who heard the pain in every note. And together, they created something that transcended their individual stories. They created a legacy of love that would ripple forward through generations, proof that even the most broken among us can be made whole, that even the darkest nights eventually give way to dawn, and that love, true love, has the power to redeem and restore and make all things new. Their story became more than just a tale of rescue and romance. It became a testament to the strength of the human spirit, to the power of compassion, and the importance of standing up for those who cannot stand up for themselves. Xavier had heard Zelda's pain and refused to look away, and that single act of courage had changed not just 2 lives but countless lives that followed. In the end, that was the true magic of Xavier and Zelda Kendrick. Not that they had a perfect love, but that they had a real one, built on a foundation of mutual respect, unwavering support, and a daily choice to honor and cherish each other. They had taken the broken pieces of Zelda's life and built something beautiful, proving that it is never too late to start over, never too late to choose love, never too late to believe in happy endings. And so the story ends where it began, with a song and a cowboy and a woman brave enough to accept the hand extended to her in the darkness. From the Silver Dollar Saloon to the porch of their ranch home, from bruises and fear to love and joy, Zelda and Xavier had traveled a lifetime together, and every step of that journey was a gift, every moment a treasure, every day a new verse in the beautiful song of their shared life. Their love had endured through trials and triumphs, through sorrow and celebration, through the ordinary moments that make up a life and the extraordinary ones that define it. And in the end, that love had proven to be exactly what Zelda needed to heal, what Xavier needed to find purpose, and what the world needed to believe in the possibility of redemption and second chances. The pain in Zelda's songs had been heard, her bruises had healed, and in their place, she had found a love that transformed everything. It was a love story for the ages, played out against the backdrop of the Wild West, a tale of courage and hope and the incredible power of one person to change another's life simply by refusing to look away from suffering. And so they rest together now, side by side, their story complete but never forgotten, a beacon of hope for anyone who has ever suffered, ever despaired, ever wondered if healing was possible. Xavier and Zelda Kendrick proved that it was, that love could conquer fear, that courage could overcome cruelty, and that 2 broken people could come together to create something whole and beautiful and enduring. Their legacy lives on in the music that still fills the ranch house, in the lessons taught to children and grandchildren, in the horses that bear their bloodline and the land that still bears their name. But most of all, their legacy lives on in the story itself, a reminder that heroes come in many forms, sometimes as cowboys who hear the pain in a song and refuse to let it go unanswered, and sometimes as women who find the strength to accept help and build new lives from the ashes of old ones. This was their story, the saloon singer and the cowboy, 2 souls who found each other in the darkness and created a light that still shines bright, a love that conquered all, and a happiness that was earned through courage, preserved through commitment, and celebrated through every sunrise and sunset they shared together on their California ranch. It was a story of the Wild West, of hard times and harder choices, but above all, it was a story of love, the kind of love that heals all wounds and makes all things possible, the kind of love that lasts forever.